I'm honestly sick of all of the BS surrounding health and pain and movement. We've seen so many people in pain who've been told to stop running, stop lifting, and stop moving. They've been taught to fear their bodies and fear movement when movement is the one thing they actually need more of. We've spent years teaching people how to get out of pain and get back to doing the things they love. And what we've learned is most people don't need fixing. They need clarity. They need to be taught what their diagnosis actually means, and they need a personalized plan to help them meet their goals. There's so much noise out there about health, I decided to stop getting angry about it and start putting the right noise into the world. And that's what the Made to Move podcast is. Some episodes are about pain and injuries. Some are about how to improve your health. Some are about what it actually looks like behind the scenes to build a different kind of healthcare. So if you want to understand your body, get out of pain, and take ownership of your health, and see what it looks like when a bunch of physical therapists try to change healthcare, this podcast is for you. Because we were all made to move. Welcome to the very first official episode of the Made to Move podcast. So I've hosted the Healthy Charleston podcast since 2020. And over the years, I've been able to sit down with some amazing people who are changing lives in our community here in Charleston. But the mission of helping people get out of pain and move more and improve their health is really beyond one city. So I want this podcast, the Made to Move podcast, to reflect our mission, teaching people how to get out of pain and how to stay active and healthy for life. And I want to go behind the curtain a little bit and share the stories of Made to Move along the way. What we're doing, how we got here, where we're going. And so today I'm starting it by telling a story I've actually never shared publicly before. So if you're listening to this, we are publishing this January of 2026. As moms do, my mom was decluttering a few weeks ago, and she found a letter that I wrote to them in 2016, in January of 2016. So I was on, at the time, a medical mission trip in Ecuador. It was my junior year of college. It was the last week of winter break. And in this letter, I told them that I had finally decided what I wanted to do with my life. I told them I was going to become a physical therapist. So she sent me a picture of it a couple weeks ago and was like, "Do you remember this?" And I immediately started crying, and I was like, "I need you to bring this to me right now." And she brought it to me. So then looking at the letter, I realized it's been exactly 10 years since I wrote that letter. And 10 years. And reading this letter also made me realize I've never shared the story publicly of how I got here and why I chose physical therapy and why Made to Move exists, how Elliot and I took over ownership a few years ago, how we're trying to change healthcare, why I care so much about this, and why this is so much more than a job or a business to us. And I think that if you would have told the girl who wrote that letter on the bus in Ecuador 10 years ago what she would be a part of 10 years later, I do think she would have been shocked, but I also think she would have been even more certain and convicted that this was the right path for her. So today's episode is the story behind all of this. The story personally of how movement and exercise changed my life and my life trajectory. The story of how I almost left PT before I really even started, and how I went from a physical therapist to owning a business with my boyfriend at the time, which was insane, but now he's my husband, so it's okay. This is also the story of how Made to Move went from in a closet inside a gym to something that is so much bigger than a clinic, a job, or a local business. So before I read you that letter, I need to take you back to where this all started and who I was before any of this ever existed. Maybe even before podcasts existed. They definitely were not that big back then. So I would say most physical therapists played sports growing up. They had some injury, they went to PT, and they were like, "I want to do that when I grow up." And that was not the case for me. I was not a sporty kid. I did not grow up playing sports. I didn't really like sports. I didn't play them until 7th grade. I hated all the summer sport camps that my parents made me go to. I liked theater, I liked acting, and I liked being alone. And if Mom, you're listening to this, you know that that's true. And I was sick, like all the time. I was always home from school, always at the doctor, always on some medication. And I know a lot of kids are sick, but it got really bad my freshman year of high school. I got mono for the second time, and it lasted like 7 months. I had tonsillitis 7 times in 1 year. I almost went on homebound status. So if you miss too much school, they basically are like, stay home. And every time I would go back to school or play volleyball again, I would just get knocked right back down. And I spent, as a freshman in high school, I guess like 14 months on the couch. My friends all hung out without me, if I even had friends at that point, which is brutal when you're a 14-year-old girl. And I just remember feeling depressed and sick of being called the sick girl. So that goes on. And then in January of that year, I hit this breaking point where I was just like, I'm done with this. I have to break this cycle. So I got a YMCA membership down the street, and my brother would drive me every day after school. So instead of me going home to sit on the couch and take a nap, which I would do every day, I would do the elliptical. I taught myself how to do the machines, a lot of Pinterest workouts, but I went every single day after school. And that is when everything started changing for me. I stopped feeling depressed. I stopped missing school. I started hanging out with my friends again. I decided to join the soccer team, and I had a new identity, and I wasn't the sick girl anymore. And really since then, so that was January of 2010, movement and exercise have been absolute non-negotiables in my life. And when I was sad in high school, over sad things like breakups, I would go for a run. And when I was stressed in college, I would go to the gym. And movement really pulled me out of the pit, and it impacted me physically and mentally more than anything. It wasn't physical therapy that changed my life for me. That's not my story. It was really learning how to exercise and movement. So fast forward to college, my roommate and best friend, Christian, she introduces me to CrossFit. And say whatever you want about CrossFit, but for me, it was like I finally found my people who felt the same way about movement that I did. It made their lives better, and it allowed them to handle anything that life threw at them. So I went from being the sick girl to now the CrossFit girl and the strong girl. And, it's not like I was an elite athlete or anything, but it really changed like how I saw myself completely. And I watched other people change their lives in that gym, just like I did. So I really drank the Kool-Aid, and I wanted to coach. I wanted to own a gym, and I just wanted everyone to feel what I felt. And I wanted to spread the good news of CrossFit everywhere. So at this point, I'm in college. I'm pre-med because that's what they all tell you to do. And I'm shadowing doctors trying to figure out, like, is this actually what I want to do? And almost every single one of them tells me the same thing. They're like, Hannah, healthcare is changing. I barely get any time with my patients. If I were your age, I would choose something different. And I'm like, well, now I'm really, really so inspired. So I thought maybe global health would get me going. And that's how I ended up in a medical mission trip in Ecuador. And don't get me wrong, it was incredible. The people were amazing. The work was super important. And I think we really did help a lot of people. But what stuck with me and what made me write this letter was how many people were in pain there and how many people were struggling to just meet the demands of their daily lives, because these people were manual laborers. Their bodies were their livelihoods, and their knees and their backs and their shoulders, everything hurt. And at the time, all we really could do for most of them was say, here's some Advil and you need to go to physical therapy. And I was very disappointed in this because I wanted to see the physical therapy side. I wanted to see how PT helped these patients. And at the time, and still am, I was very passionate about CrossFit and lifting weights and exercise. And I, drinking the Kool-Aid, was like, what if these people were taught how to train their bodies to be capable of the things that they're doing? Like, what if we could make those people stronger and healthier? And I just wanted to be on the PT side of things. So on that trip, we had a lot of quiet time. Long bus rides, no phone service, no Instagram. Doom scrolling was not a thing, which was a really great time. So it was just me and my thoughts and like my iPod. And that's when I had this epiphany. And I realized through all this thinking that I was on this path that I really didn't want for myself, that I had chosen medical school because someone else wanted that for my life. And I chose it because I thought it was impressive and I thought it would make me money. And at 20 years old, I was very impressionable and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I realized, like, if you're going to go to medical school, you have to be passionate about it. You have to want it. And I have friends who have dedicated decades and sacrificed huge things in their lives because they love it and they save lives every day. But I personally, Hannah, did not feel called for that at all. So I'm on the bus And I realized I was completely avoiding thinking about my future because I had this real dissonance between my values and who I was and what I believe versus the actual path that I was on. And those things were no longer aligned because I wanted to be on the preventative side of things and I wanted to help people move and exercise and knock down any barriers that were in the way of them exercising and improving their health. But I was on this path that I just did not want to be on anymore. So I made the first real adult life decision at that time, and I decided to pursue a path that actually matched who I was and what I believed and how I wanted to change people's lives. And that decision turned into this letter. And all of a sudden, once I get back to school, I was just filled with this drive and motivation that I never had with medical school. It was like, once I made this decision and I took action, all these little dominoes started falling into place. So I eventually get into PT school and I am so excited about my new life in Charleston. I love learning anatomy. I'm a nerd. I loved learning just about the body and I was really all in. And then I got on clinical rotations and I felt that disappointment again. And I felt this disconnect because one, I didn't realize how much of our job would be dictated by insurance companies and how much time would be spent on notes and how many patients we'd see at once and how little one-on-one time there actually was in a lot of these clinics we were working in. But what bothered me the most was this messaging and the beliefs that a lot of physical therapists had and still have, unfortunately. So I walk into PT school thinking that I'm going to help people move more and move more freely and get stronger and become more capable. But what I started hearing from these other physical therapists and the mentors and all that over and over was, don't lift like that. That's bad for your back. Running is bad for your knees. You're going to pay for it later. They made fun of me because I did CrossFit. You know, CrossFit's hurting you. Your posture is destroying your spine. And I just kept thinking, movement is the one habit that improves almost every single aspect of human health. And we are physical therapists. And we are now teaching people to be afraid of movement and afraid of their bodies. And there was this one patient I still remember, and that he really sealed the deal for me. So he was a golfer, older gentleman, a dad. He had chronic low back pain, and he had been in and out of this same clinic for years, 6 weeks at a time. You know, insurance would cut him off. He'd leave, and then he'd come back again with the same pain. Most of his sessions were spent on the table, 30 times a week, massage and manual therapy, low-level core exercises, and really just like short-term relief that did not ever change the trajectory of his pain or his life. So when I finally get the chance to treat him, you know, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I was like, we're going to do this differently, and we're going to move, and we're going to strengthen, and we're going to load. And I wanted him to do Jefferson curls and deadlifts. And mind you, the heaviest weight in this clinic was 12 pounds. But we got to work with what we got. So I presented this plan to my clinical instructor, and he told me, no, you need to do at least 22 minutes of manual therapy, and I don't want to see you using a weight with him today. So I was like, bet. I broke the rules, and I literally hid behind a wall. I can like still picture this. And I grabbed the 12-pound weight, and he was so excited, and he was hopeful, and he was empowered. And then I got in trouble for it. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to treat him independently anymore. And when I left that rotation, that man was still coming in 3 days a week for his back pain. And that was the moment that I thought, if this is what physical therapy is, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a part of it. And there was a point where I seriously questioned whether I really wanted to be a physical therapist anymore. And I really considered becoming a personal trainer. And again, opening a gym, because it felt like gyms were actually helping people move. And it felt like the clinics were teaching people to feel fragile. If you haven't gotten it by now, I really believe movement is medicine. And I believe that when you take movement away from someone, you don't just take their workouts. You are taking their stress relief, their confidence, their community, their identity, and you're really taking away the thing that they use to stay healthy and sane. And that put me in a really dark headspace because I felt like everything I had worked for and everything that I was passionate about was once again in conflict with the path that I was on. So then I found a physical therapy clinic that was doing it differently. And I actually was introduced to them because of my own shoulder pain that I could not figure out how to solve. So I had been doing CrossFit still at the time. I kept coming back to my love for movement and exercise. I was spending a lot of time in the gym, and I was dealing with shoulder pain. And I had dealt with it on and off really for years. And so my friend in the gym introduced me to the founder of Made to Move, Eve Gigi. And I walk into the clinic and I discover this physical therapy clinic is in a CrossFit gym. And I was like, this is all I've ever wanted. I didn't know that it existed, but this is what I've dreamed about. And immediately it was very clearly different. I had a full hour one-on-one with my PT, Eve, at the time. And it wasn't, stop doing this is wrong with you, don't move that way, or this is permanently damaged. It was all, here's how we're going to help you get back to training. Here's how we're going to help you lift overhead. Here's how we're going to make you stronger. And here's how we're going to solve this without taking any movement away, and how you're actually going to become better because of this. And I remember leaving and being like, well, I found it. This is it. And I'm going to work here. So I did what anyone would do, and I completely stalked them. And I became a Made to Move groupie. And I would go to all these like happy hours that they hosted, and I forced myself into the group until they eventually hired me. So it works, people. I knew after my traditional physical therapy clinic experience that I would never work in that model again. I knew that I had to burn the ships, and I was like, I'm willing to sacrifice whatever I need to. I'm a very mission-based person, and I have built my life and made a lot of big decisions based on that. And I was not willing to work in a model I didn't believe in. So I texted Eve at one point, and I was like, if you ever open a downtown location, I will run it. I'll be your girl. I'll do everything. Just let me know. So then a few months later, I get a call from Eve on like a Sunday morning, and he says they're hiring and they want to see if I'm interested. And like immediately I'm like, yes, of course I'm accepting this. This is my dream job. Thank you for finally asking me. Everything was coming together. I was over the moon, and I was obsessed with the mission, and I really wanted Made to Move to be everywhere because I believed in it so much. And I was so proud to say that I was on the Made to Move team. And that was in 2020. And I had really no idea at that point what was to come. So at the same time in 2020, I'm dating Elliot, again, now husband, and he decides that he's going to build his own physical therapy practice from the ground up. And I remember sitting in my parents' house during COVID, the lockdown, trying to come up with names, and he had Prime Performance Rehab written down. And I was like, this is it. This is the one. And I was so proud of him, but I was also very, very competitive because I wanted Made to Move to be the biggest brand in Charleston. I wanted to lead it. I wanted to grow it. I did not exactly have an abundance mindset yet. So now me and my boyfriend are both building nearly identical businesses in the same city. I'm at Made to Move and he is at Prime. And it's a very exciting time for us. You know, we're finally doing what we wanted to do. We got dogs and we were in Charleston, and it was exciting, but it was also, for me at least, very tense because we believed the same things. We had the same philosophy, but we weren't building this thing forever. And again, I am a very competitive person. And there were moments when Elliot would say, he's like, why don't you just come work with me? And I was like, one, I'm not going to work for my boyfriend. Like, I've worked too hard in my life to be like, well, I work for my boyfriend's company, and I'm not leaving Made to Move. Like, I want to be a part of Made to Move. I wouldn't even leave it for you. So then one day, Elliot tells me that the gym he's working out of, he has just like a box in this gym. It's Exemplar Fitness on James Island. He tells me that they are opening, the owner of that gym, Joey Welling, is opening Ethos Athletic Club. And it's going to be downtown, and it's going to be the place to be, the coolest, biggest gym in Charleston. And it was really everything I had ever dreamed about. And my first reaction, which I'm not proud of, was jealousy. I was like, you know, that's what I wanted. That was supposed to be Made to Move. That was supposed to be me. And I was proud of him. I was excited for him. I was excited for Ethos. But I was also sad because I loved the person that I was with, and I loved the company that I worked for. And suddenly these two loves were pulling in opposite directions. You know, I didn't want to work for my boyfriend, and I didn't want to walk away from Made to Move, and I didn't want to lose the future that I had with either. So I'm like, okay, how do we solve this? So this question starts forming in my head, and I'm like, why are we competing? You know, what does this look like in 10 years for us to be at different companies? If we get married and have kids, like one kid's going to go with you and the other one's going to go with me. And so finally it was my birthday dinner, and we were at Jack of Cups on Folly, and I had a drink and I said it out loud. And I was like, what if we didn't do this separately anymore? What if we did this together? And I brought it up with Elliot, and then I brought it up with the Made to Move team at a meeting. And the reaction really surprised me because everyone was like, yeah, we've been waiting for you to say that. And they were excited. And I was like, oh, I just really opened a can of worms, and now we have to talk about doing this. So I had been very clear with Eve, founder of Made to Move, my boss, from day one that I wanted leadership. I wanted responsibility, and I wanted to help take Made to Move to the moon. I wanted to open a clinic. I didn't want to start my own thing because I wanted everything I did to be under the Made to Move name. I felt very loyal to the Made to Move team and the Made to Move brand. And I understand, like saying this now, I'm like, wow, I was obsessed. And I obviously still am, even more obsessed now. And I was also clear with Eve. I was like, okay, I understand. Elliot is coming in, you know, we're merging. He's bringing 2 clinics in, but he cannot be my boss. We have to be equals at least. And I remember Eve being like, Hannah, you need to go into a room with your whiteboard, and you need to whiteboard out every possible pro and con, because I want this needs to be your decision. And by the end of it, the whole whiteboard is just full of all of these pros. And the one con in the tiny bottom right-hand corner was, now that I know that I really want this, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what if this doesn't work out, and then it's Made to Move and it's Prime? And so that was it. I was in it. So we start having all these conversations, and we start figuring out, like, what does this look like? And then one day Eve sends this really cryptic text, and he's like, I've got some clarity. Can we talk this Sunday? And I'm like, well, can we talk literally right now? And he's like, no, I'm out of town. So the entire weekend, I was wrecked. I was convinced it was all going to fall apart. And we go into Made to Move on Sunday, and I'm sitting on the floor. Elliot's on the couch. I don't know where Eve is at this point. I blacked out. And he was like, I've thought about this a lot. I've talked to some mentors, and I have decided I want to sell you 100% of Made to Move right now. And I remember looking at Elliot, looking back at Eve, and feeling 2 things. One, absolutely terrified. Talk about a risk. I had no business experience. I was barely out of school at the time. I was just finally feeling good about being a PT. And I was like, how are we going to buy Made to Move? I have no money. I just have a bunch of student loans and a labradoodle and this reckless desire to change healthcare. But then 2, I was so excited and certain, because I was like, there's no way that I'm saying no to this, because this is everything that I've ever wanted. And this is the impact that I want to make on the world. I had seen the model really change people's lives, my patients, my coworkers' patients, Elliot's patients, and I knew this is the kind of healthcare that people deserve. So he told us to think about it. And I was like, I don't really have to think about it, I'm sure, but sure. So we go straight to Publix. We get dinner, we get a bottle of champagne, and then we go to Target and we buy another whiteboard. We have so many whiteboards. And that whiteboard really became our business plan. Like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work? And that day was 4.5 years ago. Since we made that decision, I have had to learn how to be very comfortable with fear and uncertainty. And I'm really constantly just sitting in this amount of fear and worry that this isn't going to work and something bad is going to happen and we're going to fail and whatever. And because I've been to a lot of therapy, I have learned that this fear is going to be there because I really care about this. So in one hand, I have this sometimes all-consuming fear and anxiety and just like, what the heck are we doing? And in the other hand, I have this delusional belief that we can change hundreds of thousands and millions of people's lives and health for the better if we just keep going. And that's really terrifying to admit that I even want that. And it would be really so easy and comfortable to let this fear win. But I believe that people deserve this kind of healthcare and this kind of physical therapy, and that people deserve to be taught how to stay active and healthy for life instead of being told to stop. I believe people deserve to feel strong and resilient and adaptable instead of feeling fragile and afraid and spending years in pain. I believe that teaching people how to get out of pain so they can exercise and do what they love and improve their health can really change their lives and their families' lives and their health. And for me, that beats the fear every single time. And our goal has really, it's never just been to build clinics and add locations, because if that was the only goal, we could do that way quicker if we changed our philosophy, we changed the way we treat, we changed the way we believe what we believe about PT. But we're not here for that. Our goal is to change how people view their bodies, how people think about pain and aging and strength, and to show people what their bodies are really capable of. And we're really trying to undo decades of fear-based healthcare that taught people to be afraid of movement and afraid of their bodies. And we're trying to give people truly movement freedom. So I'm going to read this letter to you now. Okay. Dear Mom and Dad, I got you guys small gifts from Ecuador to attempt to show you how grateful I am for your support. It was by far one of the most challenging, eye-opening, and best experiences of my life, and I'm so thankful that I have parents that support me. I definitely found myself in the jungle when I wasn't being chased by monkeys. That did happen, and I'm so happy and relieved that I finally decided what I actually want to do with my life. I'm so excited for this new semester and my future and all the opportunities and adventures I have to look forward to. Thank you for giving me such a wonderful life that I have often taken for granted. My trip really gave me an appreciation of all the things and privileges that we have here, and it also showed me that life is not all about those material things. The people in Ecuador may have been poor and sick, but they are so giving and loving and grateful, and it allowed me to realize that I do not want to only go to medical school just so I can have money for nice things. But instead, I want a fulfilling career that allows me to use my passions and belief about medicine to help people in the way that I'm most drawn to. So instead of avoiding thinking about my future, now it makes me so happy to think that I can do something I like. And I'm also now so much more motivated. And I realized that for a long time in my life, I've been listening to others' recommendations about my future and not listening to my own. And I prayed that God would finally give me some clarity about who I am and who I'm supposed to be. And throughout the week, I kept thinking about how so many of these people's problems and lives could be improved by proper nutrition and exercise and could be relieved with physical therapy instead of us just giving them Advil and prescribing them medicine. So on the last day on the way to the clinic, I decided that I needed to finally admit to myself that I did not and have never wanted to go to medical school, but I can instead use my talents in physical therapy. I'm already setting up shadowing and looking into research opportunities. Just wanted to share my thoughts and let you know how blessed and grateful I am for your support. I love you so much. Please hug Dixie for me. That was my dog at the time. So when I wrote this letter at 20 years old, sitting on a bus traveling through Ecuador, I had no idea what was to come. And I had no idea that I would one day own the very company that showed me how PT could change people's lives. And I had no idea how terrifying and how challenging it would be. I just knew that I needed to use my life to change other people's lives through movement. And 10 years later, that is still the goal. And that's why this podcast exists, not just to tell business stories, but to change belief systems around health and pain and what your body is capable of. And on the next episode, I will be sitting down with the person that I get to do this with every day. And honestly, the person who helps me keep going even when I'm terrified. And he will get to share his side of the story. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.